Good morning, everybody. Stan Stahl here, Secure the Village. Welcome to our webinar. Today, we are very, very happy to have my friend and business partner, Kimberly Pease, as my guest. We're going to be talking about the personal impact of cybercrime. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, just a reminder, if you haven't been paying attention, this is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And even if you have been paying attention, it's still Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So do your part. Hashtag be cyber smart. Stay safe online. Cybersecurity Awareness Month, October, every year. So do your part. Be cyber smart this year. So as I said, I'm Stan Stahl, Secure the Village. We create Cyber Guardians. We're a community-based response to the cybercrime and cyber and privacy crisis. And we're a 501c3, and I want to just absolutely am so grateful for the generous support. I want to acknowledge Miller Kaplan. Their generosity is phenomenal, helping us grow just from a Los Angeles-based organization, ultimately all the way to global. So we're very, very grateful to that. You can't have cybersecurity without a cartoon. So this is this month's cartoon, two dogs talking to each other. I think we're named after computer passwords. So yeah, sadly, that may be part of the reality, part of the why it's so easy for cyber criminals to break in. Let's try Fido and Butch and, you know, all those other dog names and so on. So as I said, this month, my guest is Kimberly Pease, Director of Information Security at Miller Kaplan, former Vice President at Citadel Information Group, our company, before it was just recently purchased by Miller Kaplan. Great to have you here, Kimberly.
Thank you, Stan. As always, good to see you.
Yes, super glad to have you. So jumping right into it, these are the key discussion points. Kim, why don't you talk us through these?
All right. So first of all, thank you again, and hello to everybody. And I hope everybody's safe and healthy in these tumultuous times. What we're going to be talking about today is going to come down to emotions and how we interact specifically with instructions that are provided us either through phone calls or emails, and how to avoid getting tricked by these cyber criminals, which we'll talk about all the statistics today, but one in particular is just since February and March of this year, the number of cyber attacks is up reportedly 37%, and the percentage of phishing attacks is up 600%. And so we have a lot of people that are falling victim, which is why we're so excited to be here today to talk about really what's going on and how employees and consumers can protect themselves. And then we'll have some discussions about leadership and the conversations that should be going on between the executives up at the top of the totem pole and the employees that are farther down the totem pole.
Yeah, exactly, Kim. And to your point that we're truly, you know, things are getting worse. I saw another report today. Again, people working at home. There's a distraction element typically as we are working at home. I know you have kids at home. I don't. I'm an empty nester at this point. But that said, you know, they're distractions. The doorbell rings, and we got this to take care of, and that to take care of, and it just gets makes the whole thing so much more difficult. And I think what's unique about what you and I are going to talk about this morning is we're looking at this. I mean, typically, if you know, you read the news and it's so and so was hacked, or there was a breach here, or this much money was lost in cyber, you know, through a cyber event or whatever. And the discussion focuses around the objective facts of what happened and what the loss was and what the consequences were. In that objective sense, fines are levied against because of GDPR violations, whatever those are. Well, we're going to look at this from a different perspective. We're going to look at this from the perspective of the emotions that go into things. And I purposely switched to this slide to begin talking about this subject. This was Gil Preuss, the Chief Executive Officer, the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington, D.C. This was in the Washington Post after they had suffered a $7.5 million hack. And I mean, these guys, I mean, the Jewish Federation, like here in Los Angeles, is just, it's a phenomenal organization. They do great, wonderful things, not just into the Jewish community, but to the broader community as well. As I say, I know the Los Angeles Federation. And you read Gil's language, it is heartbreaking and devastating in so many ways. Heartbreaking, devastating. That's the perspective that we want to come at this from. And Kim, you know, you sat across the desk from victims and you've heard their stories, and we're going to go into the stories in some depth in a moment, but just at a summary level, what is it, what is, you know, how do you feel when you're in that kind of an environment, that sort of situation? How do they feel, the victims?
You know, first and foremost, when I read this particular quote, it is all heartbreaking and devastating in so many ways. The first thing that I thought, not felt, but the first thing that I thought was, this doesn't have to happen. There are things that businesses and organizations and nonprofits and even us consumers, you know, globally, there's things that we can be doing that we just aren't paying attention to yet. And so that thought is what caused me to feel such sadness, because their mission, and most nonprofits' missions are so crucially important for our community and our world. So I felt horrible, and I feel horrible when people across the desk, if you will, when we have to go through, you know, to try to figure out what happened and what their side of the story is and what they saw and what they didn't see and what they have and what they don't have. It's really sometimes overwhelming. It's uncomfortable to have someone that, you know, you've most times never met, and they're coming to you and instantly saying, my world or my business is affected negatively in so many ways. And again, it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting, as you and I were talking about how do we put this together, we started looking at, okay, let's look at the emotions, right? I mean, that's what this whole webinar is to be about. And real quickly, as we started that discussion, it was like, well, wait a minute, there's actually two sets of emotions going on here. There's the preliminary set, the emotional manipulation. That's where the cyber criminal is inducing you to do what he or she wants in their interest, not yours, to steal money or whatever from you. And then there's the post-event, the emotional reality, the heartbreak, the devastation, those words. So let's spend a couple of minutes just kind of looking through these two sides of before and after, if you will.
Well, I provide the majority of basic awareness training for Miller Kaplan, and I've been doing it prior to that for the last 20 years. And the one thing that the cyber criminals have to have in the mix to manipulate people is emotion. They have to affect us and influence us emotionally to get us to take action, which is either clicking on links or opening up attachments or picking up the phone and providing information. They have to influence us because they don't see us. They're not with us in the same office, and their only mechanism to get us to take action is through emotion. And as you see on the left-hand side, the emotion can be happiness. For example, a fake email that looks like it's from the IRS that says you have a refund. a coffee bean card for $25, right? That makes people happy. And oh, I won something, right? That's an emotion. Likewise, especially in our political landscape now, there's anger that can come from if you see something online or you get an email about something that angers you, right? That's emotion. And then finally, a big one is fear, right? If it looks like it's an email from someone in your organization that may be an executive or a managing partner or a board member, and it gives you instructions, they have to influence you by fear to go, oh my gosh, if I don't do what it's saying, I might get fired, I might get yelled at, I might get written up. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the emotional manipulation before the incident.
Yeah. Let's stop there for a moment and just spend a moment or two discussing some of these others, because as you say, the cyber criminals are playing on emotion, the happiness, the sadness, the fear, and so on, the reward recognition, the Starbucks or coffee bean gift card, the desire to please. Also the human connection. Oh, this is from my friend Bob. Yeah,
Right.
Bob
Right.
wants me to look at this. Well, he's my friend. Bob wouldn't hurt me. Well, maybe it's not really from Bob, that sort of thing. And, uh, we'll see an example later, confidence in the transaction to the extent that the cyber criminal can induce you to believe, even against your better judgment, perhaps, that this is a legitimate email. Now you're more likely to click on that link. And as we're seeing, and we have seen this, we'll talk about a specific incident later, but as the cyber criminals are able to break into a legitimate user's email account and now just begin to manifest the thread, the email thread, so that now the victim gets something, it's a whole chain of emails. So of course there's confidence in the transaction. You're seeing not just this one email, click this link, but you're seeing 7 emails that all lead you to click the link, and some are legitimate, some are not.
It's funny, Stan, as you're
Yeah, go ahead.
talking, it reminds me at the beginning of this pandemic around February or March, a family member of mine forwarded an email regarding a Stanford University list of things to do for COVID and to protect yourself. And in the top, it said, Kim, this is from my friend who I trust, right?
Yeah.
So I went back and I searched up the Stanford University. Of course, it was phishing. But how many times did people have, to your point, confidence in, oh, it's my friend, it's my family member, it's a relation, it's a person I trust. So it has to be true. And that's where we're going to talk a lot about today to address that.
Exactly. Yeah. And then moving to the right side of this slide, afterwards, I mean, it's all the classic emotions. I mean, you may have just given away $100,000 of your company's money. You may have just sent out an email with 2,000 social security numbers on it or whatever. And now the devastation, the denial. First, no, it didn't happen, it can't be. Yeah, sadly it is. The disbelief, the shock, anger. I mean, and ultimately you've got nobody to be angry at but yourself. But we'll transfer that, of course, properly to the cyber criminal. After all, they're the culprits here, if you will. But all of these, and this is all human, just human reality, if you will, right?
Yeah. And I think the most common ones are disbelief and shock. People, we pride ourselves, we think we're all smart, we think we all, we won't get scammed, it'll never happen to us. But the reality is that it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter where you went to, what university you went to. What this is human nature and human behaviors. And we all have that in common. So it's really just very sad. And again, it's a number of emotions that people experience. It's not just one. It's shame. It's how could I do this? How could I have fallen for this? It's really impactful when you go through it.
Yeah, and it's as we're talking, it's sad to people have to go through that they're going through this. I mean, let's jump into a particular illustration of what we're talking about. This was a situation you've told me about, that you were across the desk from the director of HR in this story when she was explaining to you what happened. Yeah, you want to talk us through it?
And, we were invited in, and it was uncomfortable from the start, but we sat down at her desk. And this is a woman that's, been in business for a long time, director of HR, and she started to explain the situation. Obviously, this is before COVID. We were in offices. And she broke down. She couldn't hold it together because of the impact that it had, not only on her personally, but the people around her in the organization. So she had received an email that looked like it came from the CEO's personal email. And it requested very simply, please send me the W-2s. And she not only sent the W-2s, but she also self-admitted that she's an overachiever. She wanted to please the CEO. She wanted to do a good job. So instead of just sending the W-2s, she ended up sending payroll journals and financial reports to support the payroll. I mean, she just provided a lot of information, and that's what made her feel even worse, is because she was trying to do the right thing. And we have to, talk about that. Sometimes there is fear from lower people down on the totem pole to the people that are up on the top of the totem pole, the executives. There's fear to question things. There's fear to go to, pick up the phone and say, did you really send this? Do you really want this? Going to your personal email. But because she didn't have that trust or comfort or feel safe in doing that, she sent the email and she followed through on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in that, I mean, there's multiple lessons, of course. I mean, on the one side, it's ultimately, I mean, as the director of HR saw the email, responded to it, and, we would want her to, have that little moment in between this receiving the email and sending it to say, whoa, wait a minute. But we would also want her to feel comfortable that she can reach out to the CEO and say, hey, Bob, or hey, Sally, whatever, whoever, did you send this? But then that organization had a very fear-based culture. When the CEO said jump, you said how high? And, when the CEO said, I want you to go run a 2-minute mile, you went and got your tennis shoes. It's that sort of, and we're not here to question culture in the broad sense, if you will.
Right.
Every organization is going to have its own. We would hope that they would be supportive and, and culturally work for everybody there. But at the same time, at the very, very least, if we're to avoid these kinds of situations, it would seem, Kim, that, we absolutely have to advise the leaders, the CEOs, hey, make it clear. Some things, have nothing to do with security. Go manage it lead it the way you're used to managing or leading it. But make sure you give your people space. Give your people space to, when they get this ostensible email from you, for them to reach out and say, hey, is this from you? Is that, you want to?
It's interesting because the firm actually retained us, and I provided training, 2 different training sessions. They were about 80 or so employees, and just having the CEO in the room in the first class sent a message to the rest of the employees that this was important. And at the beginning, he prefaced this presentation by saying, this is important. I'm paying attention to it, so I want you to pay attention to it. And at the very end, he said, I will never send you an email from my personal account asking for information. And then when I conducted the second class, he came in again at the end and say, I will never send anybody an email asking for information to go to my personal email account. And what's two more comments about this is, number one, the email that she sent it to, it was really close to his actual personal email. It was only one letter off. And this was a very low tech type of attack. It wasn't hacking. The hacker didn't get inside of a network. It was a very simple email that was sent to the director of HR that all it said was, please send me this. Very, very simple email.
Yeah, yeah. Now, it doesn't have to be a complicated email, sadly,
Right.
in these kinds of situations. But it's also good to hear that the CEO went into both training sessions and he made it abundantly clear, I'm not going to ask you for this kind of information via an email, certainly not my personal email. Creating that space, in that little space where people are free to say, well, wait a minute, let me just double check. Let me just confirm that this is real.
It's interesting for the executives and the managers on the line that are attending this seminar today. It's not just important to tell people what to do. It's also tell people what not to do. And that has to be a very clear message.
Yeah, so true. So true. Okay, let's move on to another one. This one, actually, the executive's email was breached, but we're looking at a situation where the emotions that were played on were a need to please, persistence, frustration, ultimately resulting in shock and anger. Tell us about this story, Kimberly.
Okay, this one is actually a little bit more complicated. It took place over a period of 2 days, so 48 hours. So back in January, we now know that the cyber criminal got access to the executive's Microsoft Office 365 email account because it didn't have second factor authentication, which very simply all that means is they got the credentials. They got the login and the password, most likely because the executive clicked on a link. It took him to a site and he typed in his credentials. So now the cyber criminal is inside of the Microsoft email account. So has access to all the contacts, has access to the calendars, has access to any folders that are kept inside of Outlook. So the first thing the cyber criminal did was set up a filter that any incoming email from the executive assistant was forwarded out of the inbox and sent to another Yahoo account somewhere. So the real executive never even saw these emails. And incoming, the other second filter was any incoming email from the executive was forwarded directly to her and not kept in the sent box out of this email. So the real executive never knew any of this was going on. So they were in there from January and February, and then in March was when the attack happened. And the attack was an email that came from the executive to the executive assistant that said, basically, here's an outstanding invoice that we owe to one of our vendors, and pay it. And I think it was around $40,000. And at the bottom of the email looked like an email that had been sent from the client to the executive asking for, or from the vendor to the partner asking to get paid. So they forwarded the email, or the email came into the executive's inbox. She saw that request to pay it. She replied back and said, how do you want to pay this? They said, we want to pay it in a wire transfer. They said, okay, and all this time, keep in mind, it's someone inside his email. So the executive assistant sees all these emails. Everything is correct on the email. The email address from the executive is correct. There's no typos in there. And very simple. These aren't long drawn out emails. All it says is, yes, send a wire. Here's the wire instructions. The signature was correct or close enough. She forwards it off to the bank. The bank says, we accept the wire, but we need to talk to the partner directly. So The executive assistant replies back to the executive and says, the bank needs to talk to you. And the person replied back, I'm working out of my house today. I have really bad signal here. You just deal with it. And she replies back and says, they need to talk to you. Here's the person's cell phone number. Call them directly. And then it comes back and it says, an email comes back from the executive and it says, I am at the hospital with my wife. You take care of this. And he was actually at the hospital with his wife. And how did the cybercriminal know that? Because he had access to the calendar. The cybercriminal planned the whole thing out, including the date of the attack. So after all this, and again, keep in mind, this took over a couple day period. At the very end, the tone of the cybercriminal was getting increased, like putting more pressure on the executive assistant, saying, you're taking a long time to do this. I can't address this. You need to take care of it. So finally, because the executive had her back up against the wall, the bank wasn't going to do anything. She printed out every single one of the emails, took those emails to another partner, showed the emails, and they ended up cutting a $40,000 check. And all of this, the lessons learned is if she would have just picked up the phone and called the partner to verify it. All of this frustration, all of this emotion that she experienced of trying to get the job done would have been diverted if she would have just picked up the phone and not be afraid to pick up the phone and call the partner. And the final comment for the partner should be when your people get these types of requests, you've got to make it safe for them to be able to pick up the phone and call and verify, call the executive or call the sender and verify this information.
Yeah. No, I find this story as well just so compelling, because your heart's got to go out for the executive assistant, trying to do the right thing and getting caught up in this web of deceit. And she's the victim in here and can't see it, thinks she's dealing with her boss, this executive, only to discover later the shock, the anger, that in fact, no, she's not dealing with her boss, but with this external third party who has just stolen, in this case, $40,000 from this company. And just taking advantage of those emotions of get the job done. Again, because so much of it, this need to please that we have, the increasing sense of frustration that she's feeling in these emails, that her boss is frustrated with her. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to lose my job. Those are real concerns that people have, all of which serves as an inducement to do what the cyber criminal wants you to do, not to do that which is the proper thing to do, if you will. Yeah.
And the flip side, the after emotion. Mm-hmm. So I met with her after all this incident, and we talked again, and again, the need to please, the fact that she says, I've been his executive assistant for 25 years. This was the first time I've ever had this much problems getting this done. And the embarrassment. And I said, did it ever occur to you ahead that it might not be him? And she said, yes, it did. But when that email came in and it said, I'm at the hospital with my wife, and she said, I knew he was at the hospital with his wife, so it must be him. Yeah. And that's this thing that we try to find the truth in whatever is going on in the email or the instructions. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, I also later on had the opportunity to meet the partner himself, and he was embarrassed because he knew that he had also done, clicked on a link or allowed, let his guard down, or however they got in access to his email. So he was very sheepish. and very, just overwhelmed with emotion. When I talked to him, his voice just got really soft, and he's like, I just never thought that something like this could happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to go on, and I want to keep us focused on the emotional side of all of this, but I can't let this slide go by without commenting on how important multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication is. How is the executive's email breached? It was because they got a password, and a password was sufficient. It's not to suggest that multi-factor authentication is 100% always, you're always cool if you've got it. But what did Microsoft say? Something like 99% better. And I'm not sure how that's computed. The mathematician in me says, oh, wait, slow down. What's that mean? But nevertheless, you're so much ahead of the game with multi-factor. So, but let's get back to the emotional side. This next one, when you shared with me, it's like so, what do you want to say? Go ahead, you tell the story.
Again, a privately owned company. The CEO, the company itself had an incident months prior. They got through it, they remediated it, no real damage was done. They had transferred money, but they got the money back. I was asked to come in and do training, company-wide training, and talk about what the incident was, how the bad guys got in, what we did to remediate as a company, what we're going to do going forward to make sure this doesn't happen again. And this was a period of like 3 months. Literally, the day after this mandatory company training that I had provided for all of the staff, the CEO himself, the very next day, received an email. It didn't make sense, but he clicked on it anyways. He clicked on the attachment, which said invoice.doc. It was a Microsoft Doc attachment. He typically doesn't normally receive invoices, but he opened it anyways, and his system was locked up. Literally the next day after the training. And he was so embarrassed by it and felt such shame and just discomfort that he didn't tell anybody until the next day. And then he told the operations manager, and then the operations managers called us. And again, we had to go through the exact same scenario that we had gone through the previous 2 months. And it was the emotion that struck me, and the irony of the situation. But he didn't act on it because of this emotion of embarrassment and shame.
Yeah. I find this one so fascinating because in that 24 hours, the bad guys, if it's truly a malicious phishing email, bad guys have full reign on that network and can escalate privileges. And they do all the technical stuff there. And one of the things I know we teach, and I know, our incident response plan covers is, this just the faster you can respond to an incident, the less likely it is to cause harm, and the lower the cost of that harm if in fact it is malicious.
Right.
The sooner you find something, you may have 8, 10, 12 days of grace. You may not, you may have 0 moments of grace. But whatever that is, the faster you get to it, the better. And when we still see that an attack occurs and cyber criminals are in the network for a couple of 100 days before they, drop the payload
On
and
average, yeah.
take over. Moments count here. And that 24 hours, because of the embarrassment, because of the shame, because that sense of, oh my God, I just did something stupid. I don't want anybody to know about it. I hopefully, if I don't say anything, nobody will notice,
Yeah. And 2 other comments is, again, the time, and time equals money, the time that was spent on remediating this. And then what I get the sense is that these cyber criminals, especially in the last, since the pandemic started and we're all at home, they're acting faster now. I think we're going to see that the average time between the time that they hack and the time that they do damage is it's going to continue to decrease. So we're
Yeah.
not going to have that amount of time to be able to go back and look at logs and see and reconstruct what actually happened.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's true, not just because of COVID, but because the cyber criminals and their technology is getting better. So it doesn't take them 200 days to do, that they can do it in a shorter period of time. So they will. And that puts more pressure on us as defenders to just make absolutely certain, see something, say something,
Absolutely.
yeah. Let's move out of the business realm, because another place where, I mean, we're just seeing tons and tons and tons of business email compromise is in the escrow space. What you're looking at here is from a news broadcast. A couple wires $800,000 home down payment to a scammer. And of course, we've seen the same thing with colleagues of ours and friends that we have. I mean, you're about to close on your house, and you're excited, and you go, wow, we're going to get into the new place, and you find then that you wired the money that was supposed to go to the buyer. You wired it to the wrong place, and now you're out that money. There's your dreams gone. Say some more, Kim.
So I know that when we bought this house that we're in now, we bought it back in 2016. Just the excitement, the nervousness, new school for the kids, and bigger house and more maintenance, and just all those emotions. Is this going to be the right place for us? Are we going to live here for a long time? And we're going to raise our kids here? And I mean, just that excitement that everybody knows if you purchase a house, what you experience up front. And so in this particular case, what happens is, and we've seen it time and time again, and I have my own personal story as well, but the cyber criminals are hacking into escrow companies, and they're not doing anything. They're not changing anything. What they're doing is just reading emails that come in and out, so they can understand when a buyer is a few days away from the close date. Now, typically, when you purchase a house, you put some money down previously to hold it till all of the transactions and the paperwork and the legalities and the fixes of the house, whatever, are complete. And then once you get close to the closing, then the closing is the final percentage of the purchase price. So what the cyber criminals are doing is they're looking for the close date, and within a day or two or even hours before the buyer closes, they send an email to the buyer, and it looks like it's from the escrow company, that says, here is the updated instructions for the bank wires. Send it to this bank, this account, and so on and so forth. And because it's coming from the escrow company, people are believing it. And so in this case that's on the screen, in another case of one of our colleagues, they're sending, the buyers are sending these wire instructions. They're filling out the wire instructions, taking it to the bank, giving it to the bank, and the bank is processing. And that money is gone. And what the cyber criminals typically do is they wait. They're watching the account balance on that account. And as soon as that money hits and it's cleared, they withdraw the money and close the account. It happens time and time again. And to Stan's point earlier, timing is key. The moment you figure out that something like this has happened to you, you've got to reach out to somebody. You can reach out to the FBI. You can reach out to SecureTheVillage. You can reach out to organizations to help you get that money back. And speed is of the most important.
Yeah, reach out to your bank immediately. Reach out to the FBI. You can reach out to me, as well if I can do anything to help Stan at SecureTheVillage.org. But as soon as you find your best bet is through the bank, and ask them specifically if they have relationships, both or either with the FBI, uh, and not just an FBI IC3, but I'm talking a specific, can you call Bob or Bill or whoever, you know, and uh, that way, I mean, because time is money, as you talked about earlier. Once that money's gone, it's gone. So if this happens, you need to find out about it and act very, very quickly. I want to go on to the last example. And this is, I mean, I've read about these stories for years. Kim, you have read about them. This particular story, I happened to hear from Warren Cotto of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, who was involved in the case that this deals with. And they're all sad, but there's a sadness to this one that goes deeper than in some ways some of the others. It's a single woman. She meets, quote, a Nigerian businessman online. They build a relationship over several months. He, quote, is in love with her. She believes she's met the love of her life. Acting to just confirm the reality of this, she receives an email from a colleague of this businessman who says something's happened. He needs a loan for an accident, whatever. I don't remember the details. She lends the money. She gets the money back. The believability quotient goes up. And now it's ready to drop the hammer. He emails her, I've just sold my business. I'm ready to come to Los Angeles. We're going to get married, blah, blah, blah. I need your help in transferring our money from Nigeria into our bank accounts here in the States. Would you help me? She says, of course. He wires money, 2 transactions, total of about $750,000 into her account. She takes that money, transfers it into the account that he tells her to transfer it to. She thinks nothing of it. This is great. I've just helped him get the money from the sale of his company. She's waiting for the doorbell to ring that he's here and life is going to be wonderful. The doorbell rings. She answers the door and it's the FBI. I mean, could you imagine the devastation, the heartbreak? And adding insult to injury, she's legally liable for this. She's ordered to pay restitution. She doesn't have $750,000, but she owes $750,000. I mean, to me, these stories are, these are not just headlines in the news. These are real people. Whether it's that HR director you're talking, we talked about earlier, the CEO, the executive and his executive assistant, the homeowners. These are real people with reality, real feelings, real hurt, and real loss in this case.
Stan, it reminds me of another story that we haven't talked about for years, but there's an organization where the CFO was embezzling money from the organization where he worked at as an employee.
Where are you going?
And he was caught, and the law enforcement actually went to his house and said, your husband is under arrest and he's going to jail today. And the wife actually wouldn't believe it. It was so inconceivable to her. And she looked at her husband and she said, tell me this isn't true. This is not true. And he said, it's true. And she would not believe it. And it's just so devastating because of the emotion that we feel so much as humans. And when the opposite comes true, or something like this situation, it's just, we cannot wrap our heads around it.
Yeah.
And it's all, again, it comes down to, we want to believe the truth. We want to believe good in people. And so when we get an email and we see it's from someone we know, or, we're all trying to do the right thing. I think that it's unfortunate, but we have to start looking at these requests and emails differently.
Which, A, good point. B, it takes us back to the slide that we had earlier. We have to start looking at these things differently. Yeah, We have to remember these items, the emotional realities on the right, as our emotions are being manipulated via these things on the left. Just
Yeah.
keeping in mind that, you know, it's not always what it appears to be.
You know,
It's not
trust but
always,
verify.
yeah,
You know, everybody wants to have fun. Everybody wants to get discounts. Everybody wants to get a $25 gift card. You know, we have to just verify the information and change our behaviors and change our outlook and get another set of eyes in a business environment. Get another set of eyes. Get your manager, get your supervisors, bring it to an executive, bring it to a colleague. I think that we have to just take a couple extra steps to verify what not only what we're seeing and reading, but what we're feeling.
yeah,
You know, I remember getting an email, a phishing email from Macy's, and there was these three. You know, I have this in my training slide deck, and I have three beautiful little pastel colored eggs, and you click on one of them and you get a discount or you get a whatever percentage of off on your next purchase. And I remember the first few seconds of opening that, my feeling was, oh, look at those cute little eggs, right? I want to click one of those. I want to see what I win. And obviously I looked at the from field in the email and it was, you know, it wasn't from Macy's, but
yeah,
acknowledging those first few seconds of what you feel when you get an email, or what you feel when you get a phone call and someone says, you know, it's the IRS and there's a lawsuit because you haven't paid, or you know, it's the Social Security Administration and you're not going to get your check because you know, there's some problems that you have to fix first, and there's gram scams. You know, my own father, my 90-year-old father, received a phone call, and the first thing they talked about was your grandson has been in an accident and he broke his arm and he needs a wire transfer to help him get, you know, pay the bond because it's his fault. I mean, all this is based on emotion. And I think we have to focus on that feelings when we get these phone calls and emails.
yeah, yep. Which again takes us back to what we mentioned earlier, kind of the three matters here, and they're instructions would benefit everybody. Question and verify instructions and emails. Everybody look at things differently. You know, in that 1 inch between stimulus and response, there's freedom. We're free to ignore the stimulus, or we're free to blindly click on that stimulus. And in that inch, that's when we have to be careful. We've got to look at things differently. And to your point, if you're a leader, for God's sakes, create a safe environment to question. You know, maybe you don't question certain aspects of the business, you know, the sales strategy or whatever. I'm not going to go there, but whatever those things are, you know, every business, every organization is different. But anytime there's that opportunity that something bad's about to happen, question. And leaders create that safe space. Yeah, Kimmy?
Leaders can also, in addition to creating that safe space, provide employees with steps of what to do. When you get an email from me, pick up the phone. When you get a phone call and it's, you know, asking you to provide information, go to your supervisor. Say, take the name and number and we'll get back to you. And I know that's, again, extra steps. It's one more thing to write down on our to-do list, but the consequences and the risk of not doing so far outweigh the few moments that it's going to take to verify this information.
Yep, absolutely true. Which takes us to the greatest summary of all of this that I know. Good old Ben Franklin. Distrust and caution are the parents of security. Start there. Yeah. Okay. Kim, you and I have worked together for going on 20 years. There's a great deal of trust. But I have that trust for you. I can't have that trust for an email that ostensibly comes from you.
Right.
There's got to be that disconnect there, right?
Right. And also, but in that 20 years of working together, we also put in steps to put checks on each other, right? It's common sense to put checks not only for fraudulent issues, but for quality control and for, all the things of making sure our business ran smoothly.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Um, and a good point there that this ties right into other quality aspects as we're managing quality and so on. The same distrust and caution. I remember in the probably third grade, second grade, something like that, when I was learning to add columns of numbers, what would you do? You would add the column down, and then you would add the column back up as a check to make sure you got the same answer.
Yep.
When we put a report together, some on our team will put the report together. Somebody else on our team will review the report. Accountants have that same quality control. Manufacturers have that same quality control. Building that sense of distrust and caution, because it's not always the hacker. Sometimes we just make legitimate, honest mistakes. We want to catch those as well. And it's through this distrust and caution that we get the opportunity to do that. Yeah.
Indeed.
So, Kim, as always, this has been great. I'm going to move on. Okay, this was great. Where are we going next? From here, and that's to next month's webinar. I've got Darren McElroy, Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. He and I will be having a conversation on the cyber risk landscape. And that's November 12th from 10 to 11 Pacific time. And this is one of 4 ongoing regular events that Secure the Village has every month. We have 2 roundtables, a financial services roundtable and an insurance brokers roundtable. The insurance brokers one is recent for us. We also have, it's kind of like a roundtable, but we call it a happy hour because it's at 4:30 in the afternoon. That's focused on technology and security management. And then we're back here with our once a month, quote, webinar, the Information Security Management webinar, which is always on the, whatever this is, the second Thursday of the month from 10 to 11. So that's the upcoming basic calendar. But I'm also really pleased to announce, as part of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we're going to have an event on October 28th from 1 to 5 in the afternoon, a reasonable approach to reasonable security, conversations on reasonable security. It's something we in Secure the Village have been involved in some sense, since the beginning of Secure the Village, when we first put together a basic set of things that IT vendors should be doing from a security perspective. With the passage of the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, we looked at, okay, CCPA calls for every organization to have, quote, reasonable practices, reasonable security practices, but it gives no real guidance as to what reasonable means. We put together back then a set of practices that we view to be minimum reasonable. If you're not doing these things, you are not reasonable. But again, that's a stepping stone on the path. It's not the last word, but it was intended to be a first word. We're actually in a conversation this afternoon on Interop 2020, if you happen to be attending Interop. It's virtual this year, which is why I'm here in Los Angeles, and I'm going to be at Interop 2020 in Austin in a few hours, pre-recorded as well. But we're having a conversation, several of us on the from the Secure the Village perspective, on reasonable security and the role that we see Secure the Village playing in that. So here we're going to have conversations. We're going to have attorneys, insurance people, cybersecurity professionals on this. Be panels. We'll breakout rooms, which Zoom gives us that ability to have. We're going to have little sections, talk with experts, and we'll have lots of networking opportunities as well, all through the platform that we'll have. And we're going to be looking at things like, how do you identify your risk exposure? What are the things that one looks at there? And I mean, at the high level, it's, well, what information do we have? What laws and regulations are we subject to? I mean, that it's in its own way defines your risk exposure. We'll be talking about risk tolerance. I mean, in our case, everybody has their own different risk tolerance. Talk to a wealth manager, a stockbroker, if you will. Some people want to be in conservative bonds. Other people want to give me real aggressive stuff because they like the they've got a tolerance where they can handle that. It's the same in cybersecurity. What reasonable is depends very much on your own risk tolerance. How much risk are you going to take? So we'll look at that. We'll be doing that through breakout rooms. We're going to turn that into a panel discussion. And then we're going to kind of sit back and say, okay, whatever level of reasonable security you want, here are the elements you got to pay attention to. Leadership and policies and IT security and supply chain security, blah, 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 those things. And then we're putting together kind of a flow chart. We hope to have this done by the 28th, but I expect we will. We're pretty far along with it already, to kind of find out what's reasonable for you. Look at your information, look at your laws, look at your own risk tolerance, and follow the dots, if you will, follow the flow chart to get a sense of what you need to be doing. So registration for that is opening, if it's not open already. So please join us at Cybersecure LA 2020. It's our 4th annual Cybersecure LA event as part of the Cyber Awareness Month, Cybersecurity Awareness Month. More generally, one of the things you can always do, please do, if you're not already receiving our weekly newsletter, just hop on to SecureTheVillage.org and sign up for that. It's free. It has our events calendar, sections on individuals at risk, information security management of the organization, and then cybersecurity in society itself, with right now particularly news stories on cyber freedom, on how we're going to get past this election in a secure way. It also includes our weekend patch report. Kimberly, thanks to you for pulling that together every week, and always, always, always cyber humor. We got to laugh through the tears. That's part of what Secure the Village is about, but there's other things in addition to the news. You can attend our online events, as you see, like this one. They're not only high quality, they're free. Learn from us, get support from our Leadership Council. If you're in this space, please join the Leadership Council. We have a book on Amazon called Cyber Guardian, a Secure the Village guide for residents. Remember, it's always from the boardroom to the living room. We got to secure all of that. And Steve's done a very good job. What do we got to do at the living room section? Having nothing to do with cybersecurity, but everything I'd like to say with the security of the nation. I'm now an author on Amazon as well. A book of essays that I've written over like an 18, 19-year period is now available on Amazon, called The Agnostic Patriot, A Citizen Searches for the Soul of America. It is not about cyber. I would like to think it's about who we are as a people. Agnostic, because to me, the fundamental piece that I try to maintain in that is the idea of the Declaration: we're all created equal. And that's true no matter what side of the political spectrum we are on. We're all created equal. And that imposes responsibilities on us as to how we interface with each other.
Dan, I'm going to jump in and just put a plug for this Agnostic Patriot. I've been reading those essays for 20 years, almost 20 years. And they're always insightful. They always instigate further conversations between people, and that's what we need, especially in today's environment. So thank you for all of your efforts over the past 20 years.
Thank you, Kimberly. Yeah, no, appreciate that. As I say, I would like to think, there's some value there, some stuff there. Here's contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. Kim Pease at Miller Kaplan. I'm Stan at Secure the Village, or if you want, Stahl at Miller Kaplan. Also, you've got our phone numbers and so on. And I want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes. Bobby Kennedy, of course, said this in a political context in the 1960s. But it's as true in cybersecurity. It's true in life, everywhere. The future is not a gift. It's an achievement. If we want to cyber secure LA, if we want to cyber secure global village, it's up to us to achieve that. And that's a large part of what we Secure the Village is all about. That's a large part, Kimberly, when you and I started Citadel 20 years ago, 18 years ago, this was a part of, we could see this tsunami coming in the mid-sized and smaller businesses. We could see this tsunami hitting society in ways that we have now seen it happening. And it's, you know, for us to get past this, and we will, because that's in our character, in our nature. But it will be because it's an achievement for all of us. So I want to leave you with those words. So thank you all very, very much. Any final thoughts, Kimmy?
No, that's it. Have a
Okay,
great day, everybody, and be safe.
cool, great. Well, thank you. I'll just stop sharing, and then I'm going to push the button to end this webinar. And thank you all. I look forward to seeing you in one of our future ones. Certainly do join us on October 28th as well for the Cybersecure LA 2020. So there you have it, and we are done.